What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our Tuesday lunchtime sessions, the Elastic Live user group. I am your host, Jay Miller, developer advocate at Elastic, and I'm just going to apologize in advance for all of the fun, all of the things we're going to have, we're going to be talking about. It's going to be a blast. I am here with friend of mine, fellow elastician. I have known him longer than I have been at Elastic, so we go way back. The vibe is going to be very different because it's always different when Reggie is in the chat. So Reggie, what's going on, man?
What's going down, man? Reggie, aka Cool Black Nerd, is in the building.
Right. So in a second, I'm going to be grilling Reggie on his developer story, how he got to Elastic, what he's doing. But before, as always, I want to throw out there that this is one of many of the user groups that we have. This one may not be as technical as we can get sometimes, but we like to mix it up here. So if you are looking for some extremely technical questions, we have a Discuss channel for that, where you can go and you can ask your questions and have elasticians and other folks that are in the Elastic community help you with those problems that you might have. Also, we run so many events every single week. I think we average like 5 events a week. So if you see a topic that is appealing to you or you're interested in one, then check out community.elastic.co. There's plenty of user groups. Some are in your area. If you are in the US, things are kind of starting to move closer and closer towards in person. We're still going to be virtual. As always, if you're on this channel, hit the subscribe button, because all of our meetups, all of our user groups, these live events, things like that, they all end up on this channel. So you can come here and you can always get the content that you're looking for. But as always, I am so pumped to be talking with you, Reggie. How have things been? How have things been since you've gotten to Elastic? Let's start with there.
Man, things have been good. Things have been good. It's been a journey. I will definitely say this has by far been the most technically challenging company that I've ever worked at. Like it's been very challenging. So it really has forced me to refocus in a way and really recommit in a way that I hadn't done in the past. So, but I like it. I like getting better. I'm excited about getting better. I'm excited about the challenges ahead. So it's been a good journey so far.
Let's talk about that journey. How did you wind up at Elastic? Like, what was the story? Because all I know is I'm doing my orientation, and then I see on Twitter that Reggie is joining the same company that I've been at for like a month. So I don't know. I mean, if it was me, if I encouraged you to apply, just tell me. Like, you don't have to lie to everybody. But I want to know, like, what was the story that got you to Elastic?
Oh man, the story that got me to Elastic. This is going to be one for the book. So at the time, as you know, I was doing my podcast, Coolest Nerds in the Room. Shout out to my homegirl, Stephanie. We were doing a podcast, Coolest Nerds in the Room. You know, we would go on, we would talk noise about, being Black in tech and just the struggles and all of the things. But I also was doing some side stuff on, some side work with creating YouTube videos, as well as Twitch streaming. I was Twitch streaming at the time. So I was SRE at another company. And I just kind of started getting into doing Golang and Terraform on Twitch Live. And so there's a gentleman by the name of Matt Schaefer who works here at Elastic, who caught wind. And he checked out the Twitch stream and was like, okay, cool. And then he went and looked at all of the other content that I had been creating, including the podcast, and reached out and was like, hey, would you be interested? I was like, Elastic? Like what? Oh man, like y'all want me? So I just was like, sure, like why not? Let's shoot the shot and see where it lands. And I shot the shot, went through the interview process, and they just showed so much love during the interview process. It was like, yeah, we want you. And I was like, sure, why not? Like, I would love to come and work at Elastic, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I would have never thought in a million years a company like Elastic would reach out to me to want to come and work at the company. So I was just so ecstatic because I knew who Elastic was. I was familiar with the product. I seen the product in other environments that I worked at previously. So it was just kind of like, you know, it's just like, oh, wow, like Elastic, sure, dope. So I hopped on and I've been on for, a little under a year. So that's really the story. So shout out to Matt Schaefer. I owe him lunch.
I feel like that's the going around in Elastic, and that actually is going to lead me to my second question. And by the way, we are going to get into the SRE talk. I just got to catch up with like a good friend of mine right now, so I'm trying to do that while I got the chance. Hey. But if you have SRE questions for Reggie any point in this time, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll make sure we get to those. But
please do.
One of the things that obviously I'm in California, you're in Texas. I know there have been trips across the world with certain people here we won't talk about, but Elastic itself is an amazing company that works around the world. Like I've never had colleagues in California, Colorado, Tennessee, and Taiwan like all at the same time. Like that blows my mind that we're capable of doing that. But what has been the experience for you as a site reliability engineer? Because like you said, Elastic is big, Elastic is global, which means that the scope of what you're working on is much larger than, you know, just focusing on what's happening in Texas or just what's happening in your city.
You know, it's been honestly the most eye-opening experience that I've ever had, because I don't think anybody on my team is in the same time zone. Like everybody's in a completely different time zone, like from Australia to Europe to here in stateside. I have a team lead or a tech lead who's in Canada. So it's like we really all over the place. And truth be told, what made it even more interesting was the fact that I actually came here during COVID. So being able to hop on the team and hearing how everybody was kind of dealing with COVID across the world was really, really like, it was just eye-opening. It was just really, really eye-opening. I think that's what kind of makes working here cool, really, really dope, because you get to work with people and gain actual like ground level like perspective on what's going on around the world, right? Because you're not just talking tech all day, right? That's just not what you're doing. So getting to actually hear about how other people are living, how people are coping with things, like culturally hearing about, you know, what they're doing in Greece or what they're doing in Spain or what they're doing in Australia. Like, you know, just being aware of the world in a way that I just never been able to be aware of the world in, you know, in other companies, because typically I'm going in the office and I got my people, you know, they might live 20, 30 minutes from me. So, you know, if it rains in Houston and it floods, it's like, hey, did you flood? Like your scope is only limited to who you interact with. So being able to interact with people across the world, it just is opening my perspective so much. And that's what I really appreciate Elastic for, because I don't think I would have got this type of opportunity or had this kind of experience at any other company.
Yeah, it definitely kind of hit that moment for me. Like I got my second vaccination the same week that, like in India, it was like just blowing. I don't want to say blowing up, but it was just getting worse and worse and worse there. So it was interesting that like in one cultural perspective, you're like, I'm able to, hey, I'm getting these freedoms back, or I'm getting able to do this stuff, and I'm, you know, planning trips to the movies and all this other stuff. And it's like, for your coworkers, the effects that you were just in are still happening and are very real. And I think that's it's a good and it's a sobering thing, but it's also like heartwarming that you are all in this together. Everybody's, you know, still wanting to be supportive of one another. I mean, even though I'm vaccinated, I'm still not traveling. Like as an advocate, like we make our lives traveling. Like I want to go to this conference, this plane, you know, hotel, you know, planes, all that stuff. But like it's caused us to think differently on how we do what we do, but then also approach it from the perspective of, I have to create content for people that can't see me at a conference. I have to figure out how I can reach an audience that may not ever be able to reach me the way that they were before. Some things are just not going to change or go back. And I'm going to use that to kind of segue into kind of this SRE talk, because I want to know, what is it like on the SRE side of Elastic? Like, how does that work?
I'll admit, SRE is very interesting here in Elastic from the standpoint of just the focus, because when I came, this is not my first SRE role. Let me be clear about that. So I didn't come in with like just the Google's book or the Google's guide on how to be an SRE. I actually have experience of being an SRE beforehand. And when I came here, I thought it was so interesting in how we kind of divvied up the responsibilities of SRE. Whereas at my last company, when I was an SRE, I was actually embedded within the team. I was actually embedded within the development team. So
let's take a second real quick. And just for those that are coming in, for those that are going to be watching later on, what is an SRE, and like, what are kind of the base responsibilities?
Absolutely. So SRE is this concept that was created by Google. And basically it's about how do we take operations, how do we take systems, operations, capacity planning, all these things, and how do we take a software development mindset and apply it to those things. So being able to automate your infrastructure, being able to automate the capacity planning, using code, using a engineering mindset, right, to be able to create these distributed platforms that can scale and do all the things, and you're not like running everything through scripts. Like, that's the whole idea of like a SRE. And also obviously setting up the monitoring, observability, and things like that. There's just adding more structure to distributed systems. That's really what it is, and using the software engineering mindset. So a lot of SREs are previously software engineers that they usually are like DevOps engineers, or they usually kind of come from that kind of background. They understand, the different environments, they understand coding and scripting and all of the things. And you just kind of take it a step further and you start actually looking at it from like how do we make sure that the system, or how do we make sure that the application is as reliable as possible? How do we make it as reliable as possible? How do we set up, how do we create more visibility into our systems, right? So that when things go left, that we can respond as quickly as possible, or that we can make sure that we can triage through the issues that are going on and relay that information to the proper parties or to the subject matter experts so that they can fix the issues. So SREs are very much so engineers. It definitely has the heart of a software engineer, but you're not building like features, right? You're not building like features and user interfaces and things like that. You're taking that mindset and you're applying it to operations, administrative tasks, things of that nature. So with that being said, coming here was very different, because here at Elastic, the way we split up SRE is we basically have 5 different teams that focus on different aspects of SRE. So you have a SRE team that focuses on security. You have a SRE team that focuses on reliability. You have a SRE team that focuses on infrastructure. You have one that focuses on systems engineering, and you have one that focuses on observability. So there is not this, at my previous job, being an SRE embedded upon a team, I was kind of having to be a jack of all trades when it comes to operations. But here I have a much more narrow focus. So I don't have to necessarily be an expert on observability or setting up tracing, or I don't have to necessarily be an expert on Terraform, because there are other teams that focus on that. And that's kind of been the big difference here at Elastic. It's not so much SREs embedded into development teams and they're kind of instructing people on like how to build more reliable services. It's more so like SRE is like its own world. Like, we're our own world, and we just build, we're literally pouring the foundation for cloud to stand on.
So I know you, and I know that you love learning about those new platforms. Like, I mean, I've seen you do live streams on Golang. I've seen you do live streams on React, and like all of those different things. And I know that when you start to drill down and specialize, that gets taken away from you in some capacities of like, hey, I can't spend as much time developing, the skill set for like Docker Compose or working on Kubernetes clusters, because I've got to focus on my responsibilities, which are away from that. Do you prefer being super specialized, or do you like to kind of spread out and work on other areas? And is there an opportunity for that, do you think?
I definitely prefer to be a little bit more spread out. right? But I think being here has made me really appreciate the depth, the ability to be able to go deep on one thing, right? Like I've never been the person to go deep on all the things. I just know a whole bunch of stuff. Like I could tell you how the stack works front to back. Like I prided myself on being able to say, I know a little bit of React. I know a little bit of Node. I know a little bit of Golang. I know a little bit of Terraform. I know enough to be able to kind of put everything together and actually come up with a full solution and understand the thing front to back. But being here has really forced me to say, okay, you can't just be a jack of all trades. Now you have to really like lock in and focus on what area you actually want to be great at, because there's so many people that are great at so many things here, right? So I prefer spreading my wings, but I really appreciate like how coming here has really allowed me to say, you know what, let me lock in. Like, let me find one particular area and let me get really good at it. And I'm gonna build a strong pillar, and then I'm gonna kind of bounce off and go create other pillars. So it's been a different experience. It's been a different experience, but I ain't gonna lie, I was a little sad at first because I was like, man, I'm not getting to do all of the Kubernetes and all of the Terraform and all of the things that I used to. Like I'm like kind of relegated to this area, but it's cool though. Like I've shifted my mindset. I've been able to shift my mindset, and I'm ready for the long haul. So, you know, it's you know, that's just kind of growth. Like that's kind of how the world works, right? Like you kind of got to grow at some point.
I think that's important though, because there are so many opportunities out there that the deeper that you go, the more you limit the scope of what you can work on. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you do have, you know, as Vikas is saying right now in the chat, like you should have one area that you just love, and like you make that the thing. Like for me, that is like, you know me, for me, that is community. That's doing media content and everything like that. Like I can write code. I can write Python. We did a live stream a few weeks ago where I did Python, like just working in Python. But to me, what's more important is being able to say when someone needs help on a particular thing, whether that's my job or not, like I have made this my area. I've made this the thing that I want to do. So I'm going to be able to offer up that help. And I feel like that's in many ways, that's kind of where I've seen your development, just as from the outside looking in, of like, wow, Reggie knows all of this stuff, but it seems like when they needed him to like learn this one particular area, like he could do that. And like you could just make that like, I'm going to learn everything there is to learn about this one area, and that is my job. But I'm also curious enough about all of the other areas that could change. You know, if all of a sudden someone says, hey, from, you know, you're on the observability team, but now we need you focusing on the security product, you can go, all right, cool. Like what are the things I need to learn there? Let me just shift my mindset and go do that now.
Yeah, nah, for sure. Truth be told, like I think I was telling somebody the other day, I'm like, my security chops are actually like really underrated. I got like 2 certifications. I got like a Security Plus, a CCNA.
See, now you're just bragging. Like, stop bragging.
Yeah, like I didn't even get hired for security, but I'm like, hey, don't get it twisted. It can get ugly. But yeah, no, I think it's actually really important to have just having a strong, solid pillar that you can feel confident about. Right. Like I just think, especially as an SRE, because you'll go into these environments like Elastic where you might have 50, 60 other SREs. And, you know, what my situation looks like is Elastic is senior. Like it's like we hire senior engineers, period. Like we hire senior engineers. They don't cut no curves when they tell that, like we hire senior engineers. And when I got here, it was made a very apparent very quickly, like, oh, nah, they weren't playing. Everybody really is a senior level engineer. So I am, not even 5 years of experience working with people that have domain expertise 10 years in one area, right? So like that jack of all trades thing not gonna work with somebody that got 10 years of networking experience. It's just not gonna work. So it's very important to find yourself in a space to where you find a skill that you could just feel very confident about, regardless of you're in the room with people that are at the beginning of their journey or people that's 10, 15, 20 years into their careers. You got to have something that you can stand strongly on, because that's what's going to help you build the confidence to move into those other areas.
I Before I go to the next question, I want to address one of the comments. I'm gonna throw it up in the chat. This is from Max, where he says, Max says, I'm afraid on getting too deep into something and then it gets superseded or obsolete like COBOL. One, I will say there's a couple ways you can think about that. If you know COBOL, if you are like one of the few COBOL developers that are just like, I'm out here, I'm developing new stuff in COBOL every single day and doing those things, you will find a job. Someone will pay you a lot of money to do what you're doing. But similar to a lot of languages, if you are diving deep into the community, if you're diving deep into the space, you'll know if you need to pull the the ripcord and get out. Like that's a thing. Like, I mean, looking at the Python space, we have Python 2, Python 3. There's a big, argument over whether or not Python 2 should have kept going, how long we're going to support it, maintain it, and we're saying Python 3 is the answer. Python 3 is the answer. Finally, they said, January 1st, 2020, Python is going away. It'll be done. We're no longer supporting it. Like, just stop using it. At that point, like it was announced well in advance, and you can start looking and saying, okay, what were the things that I was doing in Python 2? Either I make the move to Python 3, or I look at another language that's similar, that's having its growth moment, and I transition into that space. Like, you don't have to, just because you spent the last 15 years in the COBOL space, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, everybody that's using COBOL is now moving over to whatever the next thing is. I don't know. I'm not in the COBOL space. Max, you'll have to tell me. But, you make that transition too. And the skills that you've gained, they'll transfer. Like, I will look at Golang and I might not know what I'm doing, but I look at it and at least have an idea of what's happening. And then if someone was walking me through the process, I could figure it out. And I can look at Ruby code and I'll be like, all right, I can look at this and understand what's going on, even though I don't write Ruby. Right. I can look at the code. So if you give yourself the ability to continue learning, it's okay to go deep into one area. And if that area starts to dry up, just make that transition into another area and apply what you've learned in that one space to the next.
And I also think there's a misnomer about going deep on one area, right? I think it's actually to your advantage to go deep in one area, right? Because when you have that solid foundation on something that you can feel confident about, you can take that confidence and transfer it to other places. Because when I came into the game, I was a Ruby on Rails guy. I was a big Ruby on Rails guy. But when I saw the writing on the wall, obviously there was this period of I don't know where I'm going to go next. I don't know if I'm going to go to the JavaScript community or if I'm going to go Python or whatever. I kind of ended up landing on Golang, but there was still a lot of concepts and a lot of things that I learned from the Rails community, from the Ruby community, that I still was able to kind of translate over into this new skill set. So there's so many foundational elements. There are so many fundamentals that you learn when you go deep and that you get really solid at that are actually transferable. So, I mean, because at the end of the day, even if you want to talk about coding, right? If you want to talk about programming, a lot of concepts don't really change. You know what I'm saying? Whether you use an array or strings, there's still going to be your basic, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have your basic, your strings, your numbers, your integers, your things like that. You're going to still have those concepts there. Maybe the way you string solutions together may change, right? But at the end of the day, that foundational knowledge that you gain by going deep into that one area, you'll still be able to leverage it. So I don't think going deep in one area is a bad thing. I think if anything, you can leverage it. I think it's just about shifting your perspective and not looking at it like, oh, I'm trapped, because you're not trapped.
So there's a good comment here that's going to take me kind of to that next question of there's a difference between being an engineer and a developer. I mean, obviously that's why we hire software engineers and we hire developer advocates. So when you opt for SRE as a domain, you have to have an engineer mindset. And I agree with this in some ways of there is a mindset required for being an SRE. And that's going to take me to my question, which is, what were some of the things that you weren't prepared for in terms of being an SRE in general, of just being in that space? And what would you have taught someone just getting into the space?
Man, oh man. Making that shift to being being an SRE was definitely it was tough because I don't have a computer science background. I don't have a boot camp background. I don't have any of that. Like, this is me just literally picking up books and learning, right? And I think one of the biggest things going kind of shifting from that developer to that engineer mindset was really just more so that idea of like stability, right? Like, a lot of developers kind of string solutions together because they want it to work. But when you won't move into the engineer mindset, it's not just about it working no more, right? It's about, is this thing stable? Can this thing scale? Is this thing reliable? If a service goes down or something goes down, like actually thinking about like the contingency plans behind what happens if it goes down. How does that affect other services? How did that affect other dependencies? That was like the shift that I had to make, because you can't be an SRE and not focus on reliability and stability. It doesn't make, you can't say, well, it just works and walk away. You know what I'm saying? You have to be a lot more curious. You have to be a lot more inquisitive. You have to dig a little bit deeper than what you would have if you were a developer. And I think that was probably the hardest part, because like I said, I don't come from a computer science background where they're telling you about all of the different environments and testing and this and that. I was hacking code together, and if it worked, it worked. Like, and that's just what it was. But I couldn't do that no more as a SRE. It was more of like I'm over here telling the developers like, yo, that's hacky. Like, you can't do that. Like, hey, you got to think about, where is this thing going to fail? If it does fail, like, do we have some run books? Do we have documentation on how this thing works? How are we gonna know that it fails? Is there some type of observability, or there's not any type of metrics that we need to put together to know that this thing is operating and performing the way that we expect it to? That is an engineer. You know what I'm saying? That is an engineer. You're thinking about the details. You understand the nuance of things. And a developer might not. They just, hey, it worked. It worked on my computer. Like, like that's kind of the mindset, right? And that's not how it works when you kind of shift into having an engineer mindset.
I think that's one of the reasons why there is a kind of a request for more senior level when it comes to that, because since we are distributed, I always tell people when they say, like, what's the difference in my opinion, what's the difference between like a junior developer, mid-level developer, senior developer? Like, to me, a junior developer can take direction from a senior developer and apply it. They can say, hey, I need you to write this code that does this thing and accounts for these things. And the junior developer goes, I may not know how to do it, but I'm going to learn how to do it and figure it out. And then like the mid-level developer can kind of guess what those requirements are and rely on the senior developer to find the gaps, find the missing pieces, and then make those applications. And then the senior developer is the person that's expected to be able to give that guidance to the other people that are a little bit newer in the space. And I think with what you're saying in terms of having that engineer mindset, a lot of that comes with experience. And I mean, obviously some of that stuff isn't just taught, it's taught through learning, through making mistakes, through having to sit on PagerDuty, for a long time and being the only person available to solve this problem, and learning, like, how can I make sure this never happens again? And just kind of having those moments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like the experience is everything. And I think I kind of got every job that I've had at this point has been throw Reggie on the deep end and let's see if he swims. And that's really kind of what it's been, right? But I picked up a lot of experience to where I could operate around people who are a lot more senior than me, because even though I might not on paper have the experience, I understand the thought process. I understand the mindset. I can communicate like, hey, like, I understand we need to check A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Maybe we do need to have a checklist before we release something into production. Maybe we do need to check and make sure these metrics are reported correctly. Hey, maybe we need to do, X, Y, Z, yada, yada, yada. And that's the whole point when you're a senior. Like, it's not just thinking about those things, being able to communicate those things and also bring people along on that journey, right? I think sometimes there's even the most experienced engineer can forget that it's not just about me and being a superhero, right? It's about me bringing people along the journey and having everybody, having the team think this way so that we can distribute this knowledge and we can build an overall better product together, and it not just be a super, it's some hero out here doing all of the things, helping everybody and all of the stuff. That's not what you're looking for.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the SRE side. I want to make sure I'm leaving space for questions, but I know that you also are using the product to observe the products at Elastic. Like that is like, talk about that. Talk about how much trust has to come with, in order for me to make sure that the product is working, I have to first and foremost trust that the product is working.
Yeah, we eat our own lunch here. And it's very different for me because I come from companies that have always used third-party vendors to build out their solutions and stuff like that. So when I came here to Elastic to see, like, I'm like, okay, so, you got Elasticsearch, you got Logstash, you got Kibana, you have all of these things, right? And you come here and it's like, oh, nah, we use Elasticsearch just like the customers use Elasticsearch. Like we spent, like literally, like deployments are being maintained and operated right alongside customers. So we get to see what the customers are experiencing. We experience what the customers experience. So if something goes down in the zone or a region or anything like that, guess what? We feel it too. So it's one of those things where it actually makes you really appreciate the product a lot more, right? Because now you're looking at the product like, I'm not just looking at the product like an engineer. And I think a lot of times engineers and developers can get lost in this mindset of just looking at the product as if it's a product that they don't use. It changes when you're not only developing the product, but you're also a customer of the product. It really changes your thought process on how you use this thing. And it makes you a little bit more critical because it's like, oh, I can go into Slack and I can hit the team lead and be like, hey, y'all just made a release and this is kind of what I'm seeing, so on and so forth. It creates a very, very different experience. And it makes me appreciate our products even more, to be honest with you. It makes us appreciate our products even more because, I mean, it's very rare that you get to work for a company that forces you to kind of, eat your own lunch. Like that's really what it comes down to.
What is your favorite Elastic product to use in your day-to-day?
My favorite Elastic product to use on my day-to-day. Wow, that's a great question. Kibana. Kibana. Like, I'm gonna be honest. Like, so coming in, I never really just used Elasticsearch. I never just used it, right? Like I installed it, set it up for developers, but never used it ourselves. But when I came here and, I saw how we were using Elasticsearch, what really impressed me is how we were using Kibana. That impressed me a lot. Like all of our dashboards, all of our metrics, all of the things, like that really impressed me because I was like, wow, I didn't know Kibana could even do all of this. Right. So like we use Kibana more than definitely use Kibana more than we use Elasticsearch. And I'm still learning a lot about it. Like I never used Kibana. I was using like, all the other competitor like the Grafandas and stuff like that. Right. But then I came here and I'm like, oh wow, Kibana does a lot. like Kibana does a lot. So I gotta give a shout out to Kibana because Kibana is actually it's a really good product. It's actually a really good product. So gotta show love to Kibana.
I'm always surprised in what I see other people do in Kibana, and then when I try to do it, how easy it is to get there, to get close to it. Like I will say there's some people, we had Andreas on last week that is like managing his type 1 diabetes, like all within and visualizing it in this Kibana dashboards. And he's given presentations using like Kibana's like Canvas and all this stuff. And I'm like, how do you even, I don't know where to begin with this. But then like just talking with them, I got encouraged to do my own presentations in Canvas. And I was like, oh, okay. It really isn't as hard as it looks. And now with Kibana Lens and just being able to say, here's the data, let's just see what it looks like and start to build dashboards around it without having to similar to some other products where you wind up having to like think for days how you're going to structure the data instead of actually structuring the data. Whereas with like Kibana Lens and just how easy it is to build a dashboard quickly, you can genuinely just start taking data points and putting them in Kibana Lens and saying, okay, this looks good, I'm going to add this. Okay, this looks good, I'm going to add this. How often do like Kibana dashboards change for you, where like you're looking at one set of data and then all of a sudden you need to just change it up real quick, or you need to add something real quick? How often do you find yourself doing that?
So I don't find myself doing it too crazy, but we're actually about to work on a project where I think it's about to happen a lot. We're trying to introduce some new metrics into our environment, and definitely want to make those that information a lot more accessible, especially to leadership. And I already see it coming. Like because we've been playing around with it, or at least my tech lead has been playing around with it. Now I'm about to accompany her on this journey, and I'm about to learn and get really, really familiar with Kibana and help with the team setting it up and stuff like that. So I definitely see it happening very quickly. And actually, it's funny you even mentioned Lens. Lens is going to be a big part of it, to be honest with you. Lens is going to be a big part of it. And we even made some requests to the Kibana team on some features we would like to see to actually help us make some progress on this thing. So it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. But I think one thing I will put out there about Kibana is, like, at first I was pretty intimidated by it. I'm not going to lie. I was pretty intimidated by it. I was intimidated by the elk stack in general. But once I got into it, it kind of goes back to what you said. Is not crazy like you think it is. Like, the beautiful part about all of it is like how well documented it is, right? And how many other examples are already out there for how to kind of string up your own solutions and stuff like that. So even if you're not like a Kibana or Elasticsearch or Elk Stack expert, like, it's so many people using it in the marketplace that there are so many resources out there that you can reach out to get ideas on how to set up dashboards or how to manipulate the data in a way to make it show up a certain way, and so on and so forth. Like, it's so many resources out there. And that's kind of what makes the Elastic kind of beautiful of it being an open source company, is that it's just so many resources out there. It's just so many resources out there. So it's not as intimidating as people want to make it out to be. I don't think it is.
You gave me a good plug there for our Discuss community and community.elastic.co, because people are talking about these things there. And it's not, I love that you mentioned that eating your own dog food when it comes to making things and having to rely on those things. We're learning from the technicians. We're learning from the people out there that are using it differently. And we're saying, oh, wow, that's cool. We can implement that. We can do things that way. I mean, in my role, like, that's everything. I tell people I know nothing. Like, treat me like I know nothing when we're in that space. Like, you are the subject matter expert. I'm coming to learn from you. What is something that you're doing as an SRE with Kibana that you think more people should do with their own setups?
Man, we manage our incidents with the elk stack. Like, that's probably the coolest thing I've seen. I definitely want to show love to my teammate Tommy. Tommy is my guy, man. He worked a lot on our chat bot on one of our, we had two chat bots. So I manage one chat bot, which is CloudBot, and he manages the other one, which is Vanguard bot. And so we use these bots to help manage our incidents. And so what happens is, when incidents pop up, what we'll do is like, they talk to the Elasticsearch. So it pops up. We literally, boom, we create an index for it, the whole nine, like, and we're managing the whole thing. And we're talking through Slack to manage these incidents and keep up with the timelines and updating it to GitHub issues. And it's doing all of these things in the background. And it's honestly probably one of the most cool and interesting ways I've actually seen us on the SRE level leverage the Elastic Stack, to be honest with you, because I'm like, this is perfect. Like, this is perfect. This is perfect. Like, you can take all of these incident data and all of the things. You can create Kibana dashboards and say, okay, over the last couple of days, this is how many incidents we've seen, or, you know, these are this is, you know, how many critical incidents we have, or how many major incidents we have, how many minor incidents we have. Like, you can start breaking these incidents down in ways that I just never seen before. Most of the time, whenever we handle incidents in the past, it was like so manual, call somebody up, do this, do that, kind of having to trying to keep up with all this contextual information and stuff like that. It's probably one of the hardest things about handling any incident. But with the way it's set up here, is it's like, okay, cool. Like, let's leverage our cluster, let's leverage Elastic to be able to manage this stuff and get data on this stuff and be able to run reports. Like, that has been like, that is so cool to me. Like, I thought that was like one of the most cool and I thought very creative or innovative ways of leveraging the stack. And I think as an SRE, I just never seen that before, because I see so many other people use so many other tools to do stuff like that. And I just never thought Elastic could be used that way. So that's the one. I'm not gonna lie. Like, the way we use it with our chatbots and managing incidents is probably definitely like the coolest way that I've seen us leverage that technology.
You mentioned like bringing all this stuff in, and you have your bots and you have things like that. Are you using the other portions like Beats or Logstash, anything like that to ingest that data, or how is that coming in?
So like, we have some alert management. So like on my team, on the reliability team, we have like 4 work streams. So we have reliability advocacy, incident management, disaster recovery, and alert management. I don't do alert management. My guy Daniel does alert management. But yes, we have agents. We have the Beats agents, all those things actually bootstrap to all of our hosts that are out there. And they ingest all of that data into our Elastic clusters. Like, they ingest all of those things. So they bootstrap it, set it up, point it to the cluster, it ingests all the data, and we just go from there. And it's all automated. You know, we write a lot of this stuff in Terraform, and so we use the product just like any other engineer would use the product. Like, we're using all of it. We're not just using just Elastic. We're not just using Kibana. No, we use Beats. We use Logstash. We use all of it.
All right. So I've got one more question for you, and it's going to kind of wrap us up. But like I said, this is just my part of the questions. If you got questions in the chat, be sure to throw them in there. So I know you, and I know one of the things that you've worked on a lot, and this isn't Elastic related, this is SRE related, I guess. So one of the things that I've always been impressed with is the work that you've done with like Tech for the Culture and building community. What is the community of SREs like, and what do you think we can do at Elastic to improve how we engage with SREs, how we're introducing this tooling that you're talking about to them and get them engaged?
I think one of the things that we can do, obviously, I think as an SRE organization, I think we can definitely do a way better job of like letting people in on kind of how we manage SRE like things, right? So stuff like incident management. I think the way we leverage Elastic for incident management is something I think so many organizations would really, really, really get a lot from, because that right there that's how you push the community forward, right? It's like, we have a problem, which is we lose context during the incident. We lose so much context, you can lose so much context, you lose so much information during the incident. Here are some tools that we've created, and not to say that you have to go and create the same tools, but with these tools, this is how we've leveraged our stack to go and solve these issues of missing context, solve these issues of being able to label components during the incident. This is how we solve these issues of finding the right owners, paging the right people, bringing in the right resources in order to triage and resolve issues in a very quick manner. I think that right there is a great way for us to engage with the community, because a lot of I know for a fact, like my last company would love half the tools that we use. They would love half the tools that we use, because a lot of people, because SRE is such a new concept, and I think that's important to highlight. SRE is a very, very new, it's a new way of thinking. This is not something that's been around for 40, 50, 60 years. This is a relatively new way of thinking about our infrastructure because we never seen systems get, scaled to this size before, right? So being able to distribute knowledge on how do we make sure we maintain all of this information, all of this data, all of this context while still scaling, but then also leveraging these tools to help everybody continue to grow their organizations, continue to move in the right direction. I think that would be an amazing way to be able to engage with the SRE community, as well as take some of those concepts that we see that are very popular among the SRE community, concepts like SLIs, SLOs, error budgets, SLAs, things like that, and begin to integrate some of those things into our own products and being able to show people like, hey, this is how we're doing SLIs and SLOs with Kibana. This is how we're doing SLIs and SLOs with Elastic. This is how we're ingesting that data. I think those would be amazing ways for us to engage with the community, because we start showing SREs and we start showing other SREs and people like that, like, hey, like, you can go create SLI, SLOs with Kibana. You can go and create all of these things, error budgets with Kibana. You can ingest the data into Elastic, and like, you can literally come up with these reliability solutions for that community. Oh man, like, they'll love it. They'll love it because there really isn't too many products out there that are focused on the SRE right now, because once again, it's still very new. We're still leveraging the tools that are already out there. We haven't really gotten into the space to where people are just building tools specifically for like SREs. So I think that would be a really great place to for us to engage.
With it being such a new industry, do you feel like it's being taught in school, or the I guess the mindset that's required for it is being taught in schools?
No.
Fair enough. I mean, hey, fair enough. Like, I like that.
Yeah, not at all. Like, I've seen it. I've talked to, and it's funny because I know you and I have had some conversations with some schools here and there. And, you start bringing up, I mean, just talking about the cloud in itself is a very new thing for some of these schools out here, right? Let alone diving deep into like SRE and DevOps and stuff like that. Like, nah, man, we people still trying to wrap their mind around the cloud and moving to the cloud and all of the things. Like, nah, SRE hadn't even, I don't think SRE has went mainstream in that way yet. I think amongst the tech community, we're familiar with it, but even within the tech community, SRE is like, what's that? Like, I tell people I work in tech, and they're like, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a site reliability engineer. And they're like, oh, you must be smart. Like, that's like the first thing people say, like, is you must be smart, because they don't even understand what it is. It just sounds smart. So it's like, okay, well, we still got a long way to go, because you say you're a programmer, you say hey, I build apps and stuff like that. That's creme de la creme. Like, that's what it is. But little do people know, you got people like SREs out here that are making this stuff happen, that are making that code scale, that are making these systems reliable. Like, who cares about the new feature of Instagram, the new features on Instagram and the new features on Twitter or whatever, if they don't stay up? Like, who cares? Like, nobody cares. And I think people, they miss that. You know what I'm saying? They really miss that, because at the end of the day, a feature is only as good as how reliable it is. If it's not reliable, if the customer can't depend on it to work, then does it really matter? Does it matter how cool it is? Like, it just is, it's irrelevant. So no, I don't think enough people are talking about site reliability. I don't think enough schools are teaching about site reliability, because as more apps come online, more companies, more startups come around, the reality is building a reliable product is going to be the difference between you keeping a customer for 10 years and you keeping a customer for 2 months.
I think that it's interesting that as the industry is moving into a space where SREs are a dedicated role and the responsibilities of an SRE are being defined, do we feel like we have a grip on this is what it takes to be an SRE, like from the technical side? Like, these are the tools that you're going to know. These are the tools that you're going to use. Even if you're using a third-party platform, this is the language. Like, when I think of like data science, the question is like, all right, what tools am I using? For the most part, you're using Python, you're using R. And then there are tools around it. If you're doing web development, are you using, you're using JavaScript, some form of JavaScript, and you might be using something else on the back end, PHP, all that stuff. Has that been defined yet for SREs?
I think the foundation is still being poured. Like, I think it's very easy for me to say, okay, well, you need to know Linux skills, or you need to understand Docker, or you need to have some level of scripting skills or know Python or something like that. I think it's still being defined. And it really depends on each company. It really depends on how everybody does things, because everybody not using Kubernetes. You know what I'm saying? Everybody not using containers. Everybody hadn't gotten into the space to where, or they may not even have a product that may not necessarily need SLIs and SLOs, right? They might be using still the basic, the basic, use pattern, right? Like, utilization, saturation, and I forgot what the last one was. Utilization, saturation, and something else. I forgot. But they might just be using like basic stuff on CPU memory and things like that. They may not have a product where they're in the space of, I'm not looking at how the performance of the servers are. I'm looking at how it affects the customers, right? And that's a very fundamental mindset shift, and that requires just a different way of thinking about things. So it's very hard to peg like, this is the skill set that you need in order to be an SRE. Because there are a lot of people that are adopting SRE, and it's like they adopted the title, but they aren't adopting a lot of the other things that come with being an SRE, right? So it's really hard to peg right now. And then on top of that, like, a lot of the tooling hadn't really catched up. I think the most popular tooling that I would say I would definitely call for an SRE is going to be Terraform. It's going to be like a Docker, and it's probably going to be Linux. And then, I would say Golang, but I mean, Golang isn't even the go-to language for SREs. I see people using Python. I've seen SRE use Node. I've seen it all at this point. So it's really hard to peg what specific tools. But I think one thing I will say that you need to have as an SRE is solid networking knowledge. If there's one thing that you need to know networking. Like, if you don't know nothing else as an SRE, you need to know networking. Like, it ain't no ifs, ands, and buts around it. You need to know networking. If you don't know networking as an SRE, I advise you to go take like some type of Linux Plus, or not Linux Plus, or maybe some type of networking course, or going on YouTube or something. Go learn networking, because I don't care where you at. I don't care what SRE, you gonna run into some network outage, some misconfigured subnet or VPC or something like that. Like, man, you gotta know networking. So if there's one thing I would say you need to know networking.
All right, well, I'm about to full screen you. I want you to tell everybody, what is the one thing you love most about being an SRE for Elastic? The one thing you love most about it. Go ahead.
The one thing I love most. Oh, my heart. The one thing I love most about being an SRE is really just, I'm not gonna lie, I really, really enjoy the fact that the challenges, the challenges that are here as an SRE at Elastic, I think because SRE isn't like this new spangled thing, there's so much opportunity to bring in all of these new ideas and experiment, right? Like, you can really experiment, and you can really take chances on ideas. Like, you'll go to some companies, and there might be a situation where they are so by the book, they're so gung-ho. Like, if it ain't Google's way of doing SRE, then it ain't no way of doing SRE. And they are married to that. And here at Elastic, we are not married to that idea. It's still, SRE is still a very developing idea. It's still, we respect it. We recognize the book. I mean, our director is from Google. Like, our director, Dave, just came from Google. So we respect the ideas, but we also recognize that Elastic is different from Google. Elastic isn't Google. Elastic isn't any of these other tech companies out here. We're Elastic. And so we're still writing a book on what SRE means to us. which that means that there's so much opportunity, there's so much space for new ideas to be introduced. We're not married to it. SRE is not a one size fits all concept. SRE is something that you make it, and it's really based upon what kind of experience you want to provide for your customers. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about it. Like, we want to provide a best in class experience, a best in class cloud experience for our customers, and it's our jobs as SREs to make sure that what we introduce into the cloud is that. And it's not best in class, not just because of the features, but it's best in class because it's reliable and people can trust it. So the opportunity to write the book on what SRE is at Elastic is what has me most excited about being here, because what we write these books about this is going to be the foundation for so many other engineers to come behind and be able to add to it, and so on and so forth. So that's what got me lit. That's what got me lit is, man, we still writing the book. The book is not written yet. We probably like on chapter 3. So, we it's so much opportunity out here.
Nah, I love that. And I definitely think that is something that I've noticed at Elastic as well, is that there is nothing that is set in stone at the moment. Like, anything can change, anything can be different. It's just a matter of making the suggestion, showing the benefits or the drawbacks of it, being able to put that document together and saying, hey, I think we should give this a shot. That's how this came to be. That's how this lunch session came to be. It was like, hey, we want to go everywhere from technical to not so technical to just having a conversation, whether it's a slideshow, whether it's just two people that have known each other for years having a conversation with one another. Like, I'm happy that Elastic gave us the opportunity and the space to make that, but then also just this time to be like, hey, let's take an hour out of the day and have a great conversation with one another. Reggie, thanks so much for jumping on the show with me. Give everybody a quick idea of where they can find you around the internet.
Absolutely, man. If y'all looking to follow me, y'all can follow me at Cool Black Nerd, COOLBLKNERD. I mean, it's spelled right there too. Follow me on Twitter. Hit me up on Twitter. Really, that's where I'm usually talking noise about just reliability and technical things and all of the stuff, man. Hit me up on Twitter. I love new friends, so follow me.
And I will definitely agree with Reggie on that. Be sure to follow him on Twitter. It's never a dull moment. That said, I am your host, Jay Miller. Thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with me. We're going to be back next week. We got a part 2 of our .NET series where we learned how to get the data in. Now we're going to learn how to work with it. Steve Gordon's coming back next week for that. If you want to catch more of the meetups and things that are happening around the Elastic space, be sure to head over to community.elastic.co. And if you have a few technical questions, don't be afraid to head over to our discuss.elastic.co Discord server and ask your questions there. There are plenty of people much smarter than I am that will be able to help answer those questions. But thank you so much for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your lunch.